She wrote about leadership and sales, but it's really a book about living. Jeanne Sparrow, this week's guest on the DesuckifyWork podcast, is the author of Fearless Authenticity, Lead Better, Sell More, and Speak Sensationally. She is a delightful human, a masterful storyteller, and has inadvertently mapped out the path to a more joyful life. The key? Knowing yourself deeply and connecting with others on that level. Understanding your gifts and using them to serve others. Aligning your actions with your true self, even when things get hard, especially then. That's authenticity. Or, as Jeanne likes to say, remembering who you were before the world got its hands on you. The world feels particularly handsy these days. Thank God Jeanne is here to help us find our way. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Jeanne. All right. Jeanne Sparrow, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
I love the word desuckify, DJ. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, and I've certainly had some fun with that word, and I think it speaks to something that a lot of what you talk about will speak to as well, which is that work and it's this big part of life, and yet we sort of accept the suck a lot of times,
And I don't think that that's necessary.
I don't think it's necessary either. And before we go too deep into it, I want to give people a chance just to kind of get to know you. So you want to give a little bit of your background, who you are, what you do for work, and how you came to be doing it.
Yes. Okay. So I have been in radio and television and voiceover and acting since I was a teenager.
Wow.
And when I was politely invited to find my success elsewhere, when my last show was canceled, I had always wanted to be in business for myself, and people had always asked me, the pick your brain syndrome was strong coming my way. And I didn't realize that they were picking things out of me that I should have been getting paid for. So I started charging, and I started consulting around leadership and communication. And the things that I realized that we knew from broadcasting that I thought everybody knew, but didn't, about how we connect with each other, how we work together as teams, how we get things done. Our industry works so fast and efficiently, even though we have our challenges, just like any other workplace.
Yep.
But I do think that the thing that I learned from it that I'm able to apply to every industry I've encountered so far is this idea that first and foremost, we have to know what we bring to the table. Then we have to be true to that and those gifts and how it is we serve others, but also make an intentional decision to connect with others for the purpose of getting things done. And that's what that brought me to write my book, Fearless Authenticity, which is basically what that's all about.
Yeah, I mean, that word connection, I think we can dive a little bit deeper into it as we go here. But the thing for me, it's kind of been the word of the year for me, because we've spent the last 4 or 5 years, struggling with connection, and for very good reasons. But I think this has felt like a period where people are trying to kind of find their way back to connection. And what I think some people are finding is it's harder than they thought it might be, or the muscle memory isn't quite there in the same way it used to be. And then, I think on top of that, you've got this kind of forced return to office kind of vibe happening out there, which, I don't know, it seems like the surest way to not have people feel excited about connecting with each other is to tell them you have to sit there on that desk every day for 8 hours when you didn't before. There's value in sitting together, but there's a way of inviting people to it, I think, versus forcing, and forced connection is not connection as far as I'm concerned.
It isn't because it's not something that we're actually buying into. I agree with every single thing you said. I would also add this.
Yeah.
I believe that because I started my work before the pandemic, these were problems we had before. The pandemic just um, magnified it,
Yeah.
right? We were having trouble with connection before that.
Yeah.
And the lockdown made us realize why it was important, but then also limited the ways in which, or constrained the ways in which we did connect with each other.
Hmm.
And then it becomes that, syndrome, you've been locked up for all this time and you're released into the wild and you're just like,
Oh my God, I don't know how to do this, right?
with
Yeah.
no sort of like with all the energy, but none of the guardrails and
Yeah.
none of the skills that actually lead to things that are durable and lasting. And,
Mm.
not to beat this word over the head, but authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find the word authentic very useful. It can be a little loaded these days, right? It's become, a buzz term. And that's good and bad. I mean, the good news is that people are talking about it, right? I think the bad news is that it starts to like melt its meaning a little bit. So, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
curious for you, what does it mean to be authentic?
So I look at it through the lens of work
Hmm.
because we spend so much of our time at
Yeah.
work, and and it's where I work with the word authenticity. And I will say this as a sidebar,
Hmm.
because I wrote the first outline for this book and the first chapter back at the end of 2018.
Oh, wow.
So I have watched this word become something else. And I'm
Hmm.
like, why y'all cheapening my word? Why? I love that you get it now,
Yeah.
because before I think it felt different. But
Hmm.
I'm like, don't
Yeah.
take my word and make
Yeah.
it, just instant noodles. Come
Yeah.
on, man. Let
Yeah.
it mean
There's some
something.
meaning to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but for what authenticity means to me is that we know ourselves deeply and well,
Mm.
and we endeavor to connect with each other on that level.
Hmm.
Authenticity is understanding your gifts and putting them to use.
Mm.
That's really what it is. It's about walking in a way that feels aligned to you, that feels aligned to, even if you don't know what your purpose is,
Yeah.
it feels aligned to some greater good.
Mm.
I think most people at middle age wake up one day and go, "How the hell did I get here?" Right?
Yes.
And I think the reason why we end up that way is because of all the little choices we make along the way that we think are compromises in the moment, but are actually um, capitulations
Mm.
to something that isn't true to us. And that's not to say we can't compromise. And that's not to say that we can't find common ground and
Hmm.
make allowances. But all of us can give up things that don't matter to us and still hold on to the things that do. And
Mm.
so that's to me what authenticity is how we use the gifts we've been given in a way that serves other people and our communities,
Yeah.
however we see them, whether that's hyper local,
Hmm.
hyper personal, or on a grander scale, because it all flows up.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. It's a good point. And I think like this idea that we give up things, and they can either be parts of ourselves that matter or not. What I wonder, I think back to coming up and being a younger person, like part of the challenge is maybe we don't know ourselves well enough at that point. And part of that's to be expected, right? You're figuring it out. But, maybe building the habit of what really, figuring out what really matters and what's not so that you're not so quick to give up. Because I think when you're young, you want to fit in, you want people to like you, you want the company to think you're part of the team and all that stuff. And so it's really easy to be like, oh, that thing, nobody likes that. Great, go away.
Right. But all you
Versus,
in, yeah,
no, go
versus
ahead.
what?
Well, I think just versus taking that beat to go like, what does that thing mean to me? Do I actually value it? You know?
And the way I look at it is, and this is the crux of my work,
Yeah.
is that who we are is where we find our biggest successes. The
Mm,
problem is we believe either because we've been told or it's some erroneous faulty belief inside of us because of some connection we've made that actually doesn't exist. We
yeah.
believe that who we are is not enough.
Oh,
We
yeah.
believe that who we are needs work. And all of us need work, but do we need to actually take away from the core gifts we all came here with a set of things,
Yeah.
right? And I think our job here is to learn how to use those things in as many ways as we can,
Hmm.
or maybe it's diving really deep into one aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's our choice. Free will is a beautiful thing,
Hmm.
but I think we tend to get away from the gifts that we have when we do those capitulations. Like, and
Yeah.
that's really what the core message is of my book and of the work I do
Yeah.
is this is what you know, this is who you are, this is where you want to go.
Hmm.
Is this a detour that's going to get you to a better use of what you are?
Mm.
Or is it going to take you away from it into territory you had no business in to begin with?
Mm. That's a
And
hard
that's a
question.
hard one. And it's a hard
Yeah.
one. But I
Yeah.
do think, as somebody who has stumbled their way through life, like everybody else does,
Yeah.
one of the things that I have been particularly blessed in is that if something doesn't feel right, I've tended not to do it.
Mm.
Even though I make other compromises along the way and I have my own lessons to learn about what authenticity really looks like
Yeah.
for me professionally, I've made the right choices because I've always been like, that doesn't
Mm.
feel right. Like,
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and now the people pleasing, that's a whole other thing. But for whatever reason, that wasn't an antithesis to what my gifts were and what I believe I was here to share. Because I
Mm.
do believe that the more you stay true to those things and develop those and see how they grow and change and develop,
Yeah.
that's when your purpose finds you. I think we spend a lot of time wondering about what our purpose is and trying to find it. And I'm sure some people do
Yeah.
find it, but I think for most of us, it finds us.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's sort of maybe a story that you could actually expand to a lot of things, meaning the more we search for the thing and the more we like narrow our focus on that thing, a lot of times we actually lose sight of the thing, right? And it's this weird, I mean, it kind of reminds me of energy you might get from like Buddhist teachings and things like that, where it's like to be, you want to sort of attract the thing by being you and putting out your energy, as opposed to like, God, I really want that thing, or I even need that thing. As soon as you need that thing, you're repelling that thing. It's like
Yeah.
the two magnets trying to come together. So well, that's hard, right? Because your brain is like, I gotta go find that thing. And I think a lot of young people are feeling like, I want to go find my purpose. So how do you how do you quiet some of the voices that are telling you to chase and find and search, as opposed to, you know, seeing what's inside of you first and then opening the door to those things?
It's taking a good look at yourself.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will do a whole lot of searching for the things they want outside of themselves. They'll do a whole lot of searching for meaning outside of themselves. They'll
Mm,
do a whole lot of exploration of things that have, and especially when you are in transition, that is usually when you decide to try all of these things that are outside of yourself.
mm,
And that's the reason why my work, I think, does really well for people who are in transition, whether that's
yeah.
from college into the workforce, or into grad school, or changing careers, end of one career, maybe
Hmm.
you were for maybe maybe you were replaced by somebody younger,
Hmm.
or God forbid by AI,
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be, or you just have different interests and you're starting to try. When we are unsure, that is when we grasp for anchors outside of ourselves, but we are the anchor of our
Yeah.
own lives. Like, why are you here, if not but to trust yourself and what you came here with?
Mm.
So the question then becomes, maybe you don't know what you're worth.
Mm.
Maybe you don't know the value you bring, really, because most people don't.
Yeah.
I have found that even when, like, this, and the thing is that this came after years of sitting in studios, on television or radio,
Hmm.
across from people who you could tell didn't quite know how they got there,
Yeah.
right? To talk
Hmm.
about, like, and this was their moment to shine. And no matter how well they were media trained, they didn't believe it. So nobody else is going. What you believe
Mm.
about yourself is what everybody else believes.
Yeah.
It enters the room before you do. It's the
Hmm.
same way we know when somebody's lying about something, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so the thing I tell, because I teach I'm an adjunct at Northwestern
Okay.
in a master program in communications, and I teach business communications, but I teach it from this lens because the
Ooh.
program is about leadership
Hmm.
through better communication. So even though I teach, kind of some mechanics of communication, I
Yeah.
start with this because the thing that I learned, like television cameras can tell, they are our modern day, truth seers. Like, they're
Yeah.
the Rosetta Stone
Hmm.
of understanding, because it will magnify
Yeah.
everything you don't want to
Oh
magnify,
yeah.
and you can see things with them. Now, some people have learned the tricks of moving around it, but that takes skill and
Yeah.
years, right?
Hmm.
But what I tell my students is, I ask them a few questions, like, what work do you do? What work do you want to do? What
Hmm.
kind of things do you see yourself doing? What kind of things have you enjoyed that come easily to you, that people compliment you on, that you're like, oh, that's nothing. That's
Yeah.
that's a key. That's a little
Yeah.
key for you, right?
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
thing you take for granted is probably the thing that other people find very difficult.
Yeah.
And so when you find that thing, then you ask yourself, how does doing this thing benefit other people?
Mm.
Because then you can see the effects that you have on the outside world. Because very few of us, I think about how we impact other people, because we're so, we're doing a whole lot of navel gazing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And we're because we're in that place, we're also insecure. And so, I mean, it's kind of a different version of what you're talking about, right? You were talking about chasing things out there. Sometimes we're chasing things inside and we're trying to like fix things
Right.
inside of us as opposed to what you're talking about, which is not about fixing, it's about seeking and
Observing.
understanding, right?
Hmm. In
Yeah.
fact, I call it uncovering authenticity, discovering value,
Yeah.
because a lot of times we have to peel back the layers. Like, all of our parents told us, especially our mamas told us the first day of school, the same thing: just go be yourself and
Hmm.
you'll find your people. But
Yeah.
she didn't tell you how to do it. Chances are because it was hard for her too,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so I ask my students those two questions, and the third one is about them. Like, what is important to you
Mm.
about providing those benefits to other people?
Yeah.
And that can be a really emotional moment,
Hmm.
especially when you're in your early 20s, you're trying to figure things out. And let me tell you something, these Gen Zs are so sweet, bless their hearts. Like I love how us older generations kind
Yeah.
of, kind of crap on the ones coming
Of
behind us,
course. Yeah.
because we focus on the things that were like, "Ah, in my day,"
Yeah.
which is true, which
Yeah.
is true.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they live in a different world. They have different challenges. And the thing I find really interesting, they want to do well and they
Yeah.
want to do good
Good.
things.
Yeah.
They
Hmm.
are way more concerned about that than us Xers. Like,
Yeah.
we just trying to
1,000%.
survive out here. You know what I'm saying? Like, we like good time, survival.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think that we are now coming of age and realizing the impact we've had accidentally and
Hmm.
like discovering that value in retrospect. At least that's how it was for me. And
Yeah.
I feel like that it's like that for a lot of us.
Hmm.
But what I've learned from working with these 20 somethings, these young 20 somethings,
Yeah.
is that they are very intentional about things, but they're scared.
Yeah.
By and
Hmm.
large, they're more scared than I think we were. Like,
I
I'm
think
like, are
so.
y'all having fun? I was like, what are y'all? I was like, y'all could just trick off, just make sure nobody has Instagram live on.
Exactly.
Oh, let's all have some fun. Let some steam out. You can't
I
be
know.
serious all the time.
Mm.
But when we have that moment though, where we say, this is what we do, this is what we do well, and owning that instead of waiting for somebody to give them a grade on it, instead of
Yeah.
waiting for somebody to tell them this was good or
Hmm.
by some, standard ranking, because
Yeah.
that's what they've been through their whole
Yeah.
educational careers, right?
Hmm.
And so now we ask them to grow up in a matter of a year or two and figure it out. That's not fair either.
It's
Some of
not.
them hit the ground running,
Yeah.
but chances are they had a ramp up to that, and something about them that makes them well suited for that. But by and large, we've not prepared them for that as a society,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I would
know?
agree. I mean, you know, I think we've done certain things right because you see a lot of these young 20 somethings coming out and they're smarter about a lot of things than we ever were. So whether it was
Yes.
by accident or not, somehow some things have been good. But I think, one, the idea that like you can't have fun and just cut loose and let loose. I mean, I don't know if that was just holding on to everybody a little too tightly and overprotecting and some of that instinct that then told people the world is a terrifying place and you can't have fun and you can't enjoy it. Maybe.
Well, because we were feral. I mean, like
Yeah.
we were left to our own devices
Yeah.
by and large as a generation, and
Yeah.
we have the bruises to prove it. And I
Yeah.
think that makes us overprotective
Kind of like
as people.
overcorrected on that a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not everybody,
I
but
know.
I think that's kind of the because we're generally the parents of the younger millennials and these Zers, maybe
Hmm.
some mid millennials.
Yeah.
And part of any exchange and
Hmm.
connection is acknowledging the part you play in things
Yeah.
and then extending the empathy to correct that or to help
Hmm.
people make their own adjustments, because you come into this world with a lot of things and you gather things as you go, and then a
Hmm.
lot of life. I remember a young lady a young brilliant woman I interviewed on my podcast who like got her PhD at like, I don't know, 19, something like that,
Wow.
18, 19 years old, like certifiable genius.
Yeah.
But she said, and I'm going to misquote it, even though I have the quote in my book, but this is just who I am.
Yeah.
But authenticity is basically remembering who you were before the world got its hands on you.
Mm. Wow.
And
Yeah.
finding your way is about forgetting these things that the world says or that you believe the world is saying to you,
Yeah.
right? Because the
Mhm.
world isn't necessarily saying the things, it's just what you glom onto and what you believe,
Yeah.
and so but in just like in any connection, we have to take our part. I tell this story often when I'm speaking and when I'm teaching and things like that, and just when I'm talking because it's funny to me.
Hmm.
But I remember when I was in my 20s and I went home to Louisiana and I had just been through a breakup and I was supposed to bring that boyfriend home for
Mm.
that trip. It was like Easter or something like that.
Okay.
And so I go home and I call my friend, one of my best friends, and she was like, we should be back by the time you get over there, but daddy's there, whatever. Now you have to understand that O'Neill is just a special individual, right? So I
Okay.
get to the house and my friend and her mom are not back from the store, but O'Neill is back on the back porch smoking a cigarette. The ceiling fan is gone, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's, oh, Miss Jean, how you doing, baby? Come sit down. You want a beer? Okay, so we started talking. He said, well, where that little man I heard you was bringing home? I said, oh, well, that went
Mm.
the way of, whatever. And so he's
Hmm.
asking me about, he was like, well, what's going on? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I thought this might be the one. I said, me too. I
Yeah.
said, and so I start complaining about all these men I've dated. And literally, O'Neill is sitting there smoking a cigarette. The ash is getting longer and longer. He's hardly moving. He just listening. He nodding, sipping on his beer every now and again. He takes the last, sip of the beer, last drag off the cigarette, pops the ash in the can and he said, gee, you ever stop to think maybe it's you? And when I tell you, I was crying. I was laughing so hard, but I was also crying because it was true.
Mm.
At that moment, my friend and her mom come up and she, Neil, what you said to Jeanne? You got her over here. I said, no, no, no. I can't catch my breath because I'm laughing because it was the truth and I needed to hear it. I said, don't get
Yeah.
mad at Neil for telling me the truth.
Mm.
And that's really what we have to consider all the time,
Yeah.
that we participate in everything we're doing.
Mm.
We participate in the connections we are making, the connections that go wrong and the ones that go right.
Yeah.
And everything isn't always our fault,
Right.
but it's not always the blame of someone else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so a couple of interesting things in that, right? I mean, there's one, the fact that things are not always so clean and black and white, like they're wrong, you're right. It's more like we all participated in the thing and we all bear a certain responsibility and we do well to at least interrogate that for a little bit to figure that out. And you said something about like this idea that we are participating and part of my brain was like, but for some weird reason, it doesn't always feel like it. Like we're just moving, right? And it doesn't feel like active participation sometimes. And I don't know what that is. I'm curious if you have a perspective on that
I do.
and if that ultimately finds its way back to some of the work you're doing.
It does,
Yeah.
because one of the things a friend of mine interviewed me about my book recently, and this is somebody I've worked with closely. I quote, she's in the book. There's
Hmm.
stories about us in the book.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she made the observation, she was like, something changed. She was like, what did you do?
Mm.
She was like, not that you haven't always been a light in my life and my friend and all these things. She says, but you feel lighter.
Mm.
And I said it was because I was carrying things that were not mine.
Mm.
I had taken on things that were not mine to take on,
Yeah.
and I needed to put some of those things down. And
Yeah.
I here's the thing, I think when we are just moving through, we are not present.
Hmm.
We are living, and most of us do this, and this is not a pointing of the finger. So I don't want anybody to feel bad about this because we all do it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, even when you know better, you still do it.
I get it. Yeah.
You look forward and you look back. If you're looking
Hmm.
forward, you're probably going to give yourself anxiety. If you're
Hmm.
looking back, you're probably going to give yourself some depression
Yeah.
or participate in that. And if you already have the propensity toward those things, because some of our brains are wired for that, and there's
Hmm.
nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
But the human tendency is not to say, and that's the reason why when you brought up Buddhism, I'm like, it's interesting the spiritual concepts that people attach to my book because I
Yeah.
didn't intend
Hmm.
that to be in there, but I was raised in a two religion household.
Hmm.
My father was Catholic and I was raised Catholic. My mother was Baptist and my grandfather was a minister.
Hmm.
And so faith was a huge part of my upbringing. And one of my friends who is, much more knowledgeable about these things she was like, she said, I got Bible verses for everything in your book.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Wow.
okay, cool. She said, but she said she finds it accessible for people who may not believe
Yeah.
in that, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I don't, and I, whatever people take from it is what they take from it. But
Yeah.
I do think the one thing that we could learn from Buddhist practices is understanding what presence is, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we focus so much on where we want to go that we forget where we are right now. We don't
Mm.
celebrate our wins, and we don't build a foundation that we will be walking on when we start to walk the plank to take a chance to do something.
Mm.
That's why I think it gets harder to do
Yeah.
things that are hard and challenging and new for us when we're older,
Yeah.
because we've not built our foundation fully on the what
Us.
we know about us.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty powerful. And I can, some stories of my own life are showing up where it's like I know I want the thing and I go to try to do the thing. And then it's like, this feels really freaking uncomfortable. And I think it is some of that. Like I'm not rooted in that moment in who I am and what I'm bringing to that thing. What I'm actually doing is sort of play acting that thing based on my perceptions of like, well, that's how Jimmy did it or how Susie did it. And so I'm just play acting. And I think there can be some interesting value in trying out things from other people, right? And
Absolutely.
just trying stuff. But I love the way you're framing it, because if you have that strong foundation and you get some of that understanding of who you are, what you're then doing is trying that thing to see if it sort of helps me amplify who I am, as opposed to
Absolutely.
trying that thing to see if it is who I am.
Right.
Like there's a
And
big distinction.
a huge thing, and I love you use the word amplify, because that's one of the words I've kind of settled on as one of my good descriptors of this work,
Mm,
because it is about amplifying your impact. It is about amplifying what you already have, because none of us stay static. As much
mm-hmm,
as we would like to, we all hate change. We all, despise when somebody comes in with a new system and says, this is what you got to learn and this is
mm-hmm.
what you got to do. It's going to be better. And we're like, no, the old system works just fine. Knowing
Yeah.
full and well, we just complained about it last week, but all of a sudden we forgot about those things because now we got to learn something new. It
Mm-hmm.
is, but the thing is that what is going to help us expand on what we have, amplify what we have, because that's how we grow. That's
Yeah.
how we, even if we don't really change what we do, it amplifies our impact,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the feeling that other people get from it.
Yeah.
And there was something else you said, and I'm gonna get back. It's gonna come back to me. There was
Okay.
something else you said that I really liked, that I wanted to amplify. Um,
No
but
worries.
but yeah, it's trying. It's something around the trying on of new things.
Yeah.
Oh, it was something my mother used to say.
Okay.
Just because they make it in your size does not mean you have to put it on.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So, but you can try it on,
Yeah.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to keep it on.
Yeah.
You can try it on and go, doesn't quite fit. And how many of our closets, I don't know if it's the same is true for men as it
Yeah.
is for women, but the back of my closet is full of things that I really will never wear again.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, not because it doesn't fit, because it still fits.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
Just
fit.
yeah. Oh, wow. It is. I think that's actually true for me as I'm picturing my closet, because I'm like, I got a lot of stuff I don't really wear anymore. And yeah, like you said, it fits, but it isn't me anymore. And some of it maybe was never me, meaning I was trying stuff on and maybe I tried stuff on for a few years, um, and then moved on because my body sort of rejected it, and as I hear you talking about this, that's sort of an interesting process too, as we think about trying things on. How do we get better at determining whether it fits in the second way you meant fit?
How we feel. How
Yeah.
we feel. Like this is what I say to my students, because because they're so scared to try things. I'm like, honey, the world's not going to end
Yeah.
if you try something and it fails. It
Mm-hmm.
really isn't. And I try to encourage, and I try to create a space in our class where they can try things,
Mm-hmm.
receive feedback on it, see how it feels. Does that feel true to you?
Yeah.
right? Trust yourself. Like start to test that barometer. Like
Hmm.
just like we have to get our hearts broken to understand what love really is,
Yeah.
we have to, and this is something I had to learn as an entrepreneur because I was so used to pushing and winning,
Hmm.
because like in broadcast, we have metrics by
Yeah.
which we determine, same thing in advertising, right?
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
you have metrics on top of metrics on top of metrics to
Yep.
decide whether or not something is successful. And truth be
Yeah.
told, you can find a metric that'll say that thing is
Always.
successful if you're looking
Always.
for it, right?
Yep.
So it's like, oh, with this one group with the 35 to 54s
We killed it.
in Iowa,
Yeah.
he did it.
Southern
He did
Iowa.
it. It
But
worked
yeah.
for them,
Yeah.
whatever the case is, right? And
Exactly.
so,
Yeah.
and no shade to Iowa, right?
Yeah.
But it's but when you are not looking for that, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking for, is this emblematic of what it is I want to put into the world? Is this the kind of amplification that
Mm.
is this the story I want to amplify? Like
Yeah.
that was always kind of my litmus test when I was covering things and telling story. I did a lot of human interest. I did a lot of like local entertainment type things, which
Hmm.
were not necessarily celebrity stuff, but more like what are people doing to have fun
Yeah.
and do those things. Is this something I want to use a 50,000-watt megaphone for?
Hmm.
And that helped me to like that was it was, you know, I read an article recently. Wait, I got a sticky note over here somewhere with it. Where
Okay.
did that thing go? Hold up. Did I might have put it in my phone and thrown away the sticky note. I have so
Oh,
many. Yep,
geez.
it's right here. It's right here. Hold up. Because I just cleaned off. You should see the top of my laptop. I have several laptops.
Yeah.
And and some of them are just sticky note holders because I'm not a big bulletin board person.
Got it.
But the questions that you ask yourself, one of the most important questions I think you ask is, what will my future self thank me for doing today?
Mm. Yeah.
You know, because like nowadays people talk a whole lot about manifesting and all
Mhm.
these things, and not to get all woo woo or whatever, but we always do that. What
Yeah.
we do today determines what we're doing in the future. Any trainer,
Yeah.
any fitness trainer will tell you that your workout today will
Hmm.
determine how you metabolize food tomorrow,
Yeah.
which will determine what kind of shape you're in when you're 50, 60,
Hmm.
70 years old,
Yeah.
depending on your consistency or lack thereof.
Hmm.
That is what is manifestation. So that there's no trick to that
Right.
other than choosing something today and believing something about yourself today that will be true in the future. And so
Mm.
that's what I try to get my students and my clients to do it. But my students, I think, are more malleable because they're younger
They're younger.
and
Yeah.
they have less experience. So they don't have any other options.
Hmm.
Whereas when you're grown, you got other options because you have other
Got
experience
your
and you can draw
systems.
on and you
Yeah.
got your systems and you fall back on those,
Yeah.
right? Because they
Mhm.
work.
Yeah.
But it also can get you stuck in them. And if you come into me to get you unstuck out of them, please don't fight me. But okay, if you will, I'm going to win anyway. It's all right. Because you're going to
Yeah.
understand what it is I'm saying to you, because
Yeah.
eventually you're not happy with where you are right now, right?
Yeah.
Or the state of your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I say to them is ask yourself that question. Like, is this something that is in alignment with where I want to be? Like, when I ask them, where do you dream of being, as opposed to where do you want to be in 5 years? Because that sounds like a plan. What do
Yeah.
you dream of doing? What
Mm-hmm.
do you want to, what's your dream job?
Yeah.
What's the dream situation or whatever? And all of them want to work in luxury and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, so you want to be a PR at BMW. Okay,
Got it.
okay. Is this choice today gonna
Mm.
get you to the PR department at BMW 5 years from now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how does that choice feel? How does that choice feel of what you think is necessary to get there in 5 years? How
Mm.
does that feel to you?
Yeah.
Then you might have to either adjust what you're doing or adjust the dream.
Yeah. And that's hard, right? Because I know I do this. Like I almost attach my identity to that dream version of me in a few years more than I attach it to anything that's going on right now. It's like I'm gonna be that guy. And then what you're describing, I think in some ways, like I'm going through this process as because I left sort of the advertising world a few years ago and I'm doing coaching and all this stuff. And it's like, I'm still figuring it out. And I'm like, you know, the dream is shifting at times. And it's like, hmm, you got to like mourn that for a second and be like, okay, so that's actually not me, you know?
And
But
maybe it's not
it's,
me anymore.
yeah,
Maybe
right.
that was me and that
Yeah.
was real,
Hmm.
but now what is? I
Yeah.
mean, it's an opportunity to like create
Yeah.
and do something new with yourself as the canvas,
Mm.
you know? And you already got paint on it, you know?
Yeah.
And as a fellow sparkler, when you have more sparklies in your face and on your head,
Yeah.
it gets harder to detach yourself or unattach yourself because it's really not a detachment as much as it is like kind of
Hmm.
opening that jar, like finding the right,
Yeah.
sticky thing to help you open up that jar and kind of release some of the
Mm.
pressure that's building up in there because, you don't have to stay in you. And the reality is you don't stay in the same place,
Yeah. I
you
know.
know?
And for some reason, even though every bit of our lives has told us that that is true, like I'm going to be 55 in like a week and a half. And that still sounds terrifying to me on some level. The fact
Oh,
that I
I
have
know.
to sort of acknowledge that like it's constantly changing and shifting. Like we're holding so tightly to something, even though like that never works.
Right.
Literally never.
And if you think about, and I turned 55 this year as well, the same, literally 2 days after my book came out is when I turned 55. So this was a
Nice.
very interesting
Mm-hmm.
and has continued to be a very interesting year for me.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it. I have learned to be grateful for these moments. But,
Mm-hmm.
um, and this is another moment that 55 brings. I was just about to say something and I sure forgot it. Um,
Yeah. We
but
get good
it'll
at
come
that.
back. It'll come back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think just the idea that sort of interesting times are something to be grateful for.
I remember now the pace at which our lives, like, think about, how when we were young, our aunties and uncles would say, they hadn't seen us in like maybe, especially the ones who lived out of town or,
Yeah.
whatever, hadn't seen us in oh, you've gotten so big, you're growing so fast. And you're like, in
Yeah.
the same size. What are
Yeah.
you talking about?
Exactly.
The socks and the underwear you bought me for Christmas still fit.
Right.
Because, and I have turned into that. I've turned into the underwear and socks auntie. But the thing is that things are moving faster.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why there's such fear around AI. Instead of
Hmm.
seeing it as the tool it is, we're going back to the movies that we saw when we were kids, and
Hmm.
we're scared of Tron,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Uh,
we're looking at what was the Odyssey 2001 or whatever it
oh
was.
yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Yeah,
There
with
we go.
Hal was the machine.
Hal. I was
Yeah.
like, what was his name? Hal. We're scared of that, right?
Yeah.
But is that really the reality? Is that what we've seen? Because I'm sorry, my chat PG, I argue with chat GPT all the time because he be wrong. And I'm
Absolutely.
just and wrong is two left feet, wrong is a capital RONG. Okay.
Hmm.
And you really think chat go take over the world? Maybe his cousin might. I don't know. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day,
Hmm.
is it more about where we're living in the past
Hmm.
and the fear of what's coming
Yeah.
that's keeping us from embracing the change that is inevitable?
Yeah.
And if we are constantly changing like this all the time, don't we need a stronger foundation
Yeah.
upon which to move from? And
That's it.
doesn't it make more sense to live in the right now based on in where we are right now? This is who I am. This
Hmm.
is what I do. This is what I do well. This is how I serve other people. And
Yeah.
I will continue to find other ways to do it. When we are unsure, we get off of that solid block and
Hmm.
then wonder why we're surfing on uncertain waters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that, again, I'm going to come back to that feels like to me, I'm connecting that back to Buddhism as well. I mean, that centering of yourself, that rooting of yourself. It can feel sort of esoteric if you're not familiar with it. And I think the language you're using in some ways is a little more accessible to those of us who maybe grew up here in the States or in the West more generally, because it's basically saying like you're the focal point, you're the fulcrum in this whole thing, and you know yourself, and the more you know yourself, the more all this stuff is going to be clearer of like, well, how do I move through that thing? Whatever AI turns into, how do I move through it? If I don't know who I am, I'm going to be chasing the trends and I'm going to be trying to be the thing that I'm not versus
You're gonna be the old dude at the end of the bar. That's who you're gonna be.
you really are. Yeah. And it's going to be,
Buying drinks for girls who
cringe and
have
awkward,
no just
you know,
cringe.
and like you could be there's another old dude at the end of the bar who is more like the guy you want to know, but he doesn't
He's the most
care. He's
he's the
just
most
chill.
interesting man in the
He
world. Like
is. He's just
literally.
chill. And he's like, and people, and that's that same thing. Now people are attracted to him, not necessarily the young girls, because he doesn't want that. He just wants like people who want to come into his orbit and experience a little bit of him. Great. Otherwise, keep going. And I think
Somebody sending him a drink because he
exactly.
just dropped some bombs on them, some truth bombs that they needed to hear, and he's like, take it, leave it, I don't care, I'm good. Why?
Yeah.
Because he knows where he is, and the
He's
dude in the
rooted.
athleisure suit at the end of the bar
Not so much.
who's dyeing his hair, looking like I don't know who lost I found.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
you know what? And God bless. Here's the thing: we've all been that dude.
Of
It's
course.
not to shame him. We have
Yeah.
all been that person
Yeah.
trying to fit in, doing that. I know I have.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
where you change how you dress, you change, all these different things or what have you. And you got to know it to be able to get back to the other person who is solid. I'll say this, the reason why I see it less esoterically perhaps is because of how I was raised. Like my grandfather, the same one who was the minister, was
Mm-hmm.
also a farmer.
Mm.
And you stand where you're planted. Like, and
Yeah.
that same grandfather was a civil rights activist,
Mm.
and prior to Dr. King.
Yeah.
Like he just wanted to vote because in his mind he was like, I pay taxes. If I pay taxes, I need to say how y'all using my money. Period.
Same
That's all it
fucking
was for
fair.
FJ Atlas.
Yeah.
That's it. That was
Mm-hmm.
it. It wasn't about it's right for the black man and this and that, even though that was part of it eventually. But for
Sure.
him, he was like, I gave y'all money.
Mm-hmm.
And you telling me that I can't tell you how to spend it? Oh,
Well, yeah.
absolutely not.
Mm.
And it's about this is where I live. This is my land. My family has had this land for generations. We
Yeah.
run, we work this land, we own this land, we do, and this is where I am planted.
Mm. Yeah.
I am much a part of this community as anybody else.
As you're saying all this stuff and telling stories and talking about your book, I'm like, I love that you're teaching this at college. But this sounds like a grade school curriculum on some level to me too, right? Like, meaning, how do we build this foundation?
And our children.
That's where
I
it
have
needs to
had
start.
I have had conversations with educators because I'm not my mother was a high school and middle school educator,
Yeah.
and I have teachers in my circle, but I don't know I don't know how I would
Don't know.
approach this with the kids,
Yeah.
right? Because part of me thinks they already know it. It's us that doesn't.
Well, I mean, that's actually maybe the beauty of it, right? Before, if you look at education now, and I think you kind of described it, it's the, work to the test, measure the stuff, and then you create a 20-year-old who thinks that failure is the worst freaking thing in the world because it was. Failure meant you don't get to the next grade. Failure meant like everybody points at you and goes, haha, you failed, right? That's your experience. Like if you kept, capture the moment where kids still actually know this thing, or at least sort of have the close memory of what you're talking about. Man, if you just then cultivate,
Mhm.
back to that farming metaphor, right? Like you cultivate that and you expand on it and you show them how that lets them create their world as they're trying on things and deciding it doesn't fit. Like, what a
That sounds like a
different
Montessori education, actually.
is it? I mean, because
That's what it
that's like
sounds like.
that
Yeah,
sounds
from
wonderful.
from the interfaces that I've had
Yeah.
with people who believe in that, and my mother being an educator
Yeah.
explored a whole lot of different modalities, especially because she was a music educator, and there
Mm.
was this, I believe it was called the kabuki method,
Okay.
which was a
Yeah.
more intuitive way of learning how to play piano in particular. She
Mm.
practiced with me on that. I just never had the discipline for any of it. So
Yeah.
I was, my tendency toward the ADHD side of the brain, even though I've never been diagnosed as that.
Yeah.
But my tendency to have lots of things going at the same time never really worked with the discipline necessary for piano. But I think I think that there probably are some educational models that work with this. The problem is that we don't value compulsory education the way we say we do.
Mm.
At least I'm not a parent, so
Yeah.
I can only say this as an auntie who has had conversations with both my friends
Mm-hmm.
and with the kids
Yeah.
about where they are, and the honest conversations I have with my students who are now at the graduate level, who sometimes come straight from undergrad because they're scared to get a job. I
Yeah.
think even though they don't say that,
Yeah.
that's the feeling I get from them, like,
I
I'm not
believe
ready to
that.
have a job. And
Mm-hmm.
to me that doesn't say, like, I think some people interpret that as I want to avoid the reality of being an adult, but
Mm.
to me, what I hear is I am scared to go out there because I'm not prepared.
Yeah. Mm.
And especially when you talk about like the way the pandemic has affected them at different
Mm-hmm.
points. Like now I'm starting to get the kids who were seniors in high school
Yeah.
when, the kids who didn't get a graduation in 2020
Mm-hmm.
are finishing college and they're now in grad school if they didn't decide to go out and get a job. Or maybe they're in a job and in grad school because they don't feel prepared for it. And this
Yeah.
is their way of kind of negotiating that whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe they've worked the whole way through, but the idea of working just a job and not going to school is scary.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear. Like, I always listen for the subtext.
Mm-hmm.
I always listen for the thing that is not being said. What
Yeah.
one of my colleagues at Northwestern, who studies health communication, calls it listening generously,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to listen to the thing that people are scared of saying, but
Yeah.
they tell you what it is by the way that they act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the idea of continuing to go to school, I mean, what I'm hearing in that a little bit is like, all right, if I keep going, sooner or later, somebody's going to teach me how to deal with all
Live.
this stuff. Like,
Right.
I mean, I'm supposed to be learning the important critical skills here, and I've been through 12 years of school, and so far not yet. Then I've been through 16. So how many
Like,
do I
what
got to
now?
go? Yeah, I got to
Exactly.
keep
What
going.
now? Like,
Yeah,
okay, I'll keep going if you want me
yeah.
to,
Hmm.
and I mean, and I think it's also to have a win. Like, I gave this to myself when I first started being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like I was failing every day and I wasn't used to that.
Hmm.
Not even like, I'm not even saying it as a humble brag. It's just like
Yeah.
when you get to a certain level of proficiency
Yeah.
and even excellence in what you do, to go back and start over is hard.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know that.
Super
I
hard.
see it in your
It
eyes right
is
now. Let me
like
tell you something,
very
TJ.
real.
Give yourself a win every week. Let me tell you what happened. One of my former coworkers, who I started out in radio with, because this is a TV gig that
Hmm.
I was invited to find my success elsewhere.
Yeah.
But when they let us go and cancel the show, a couple months later, one of my old coworkers, who is now the programmer at iHeart here in Chicago, called. He was like, "You wouldn't want to come back to radio, would you, G?" I was like, "Absolutely, I would." I was
Yeah.
like, especially if it's only like once a week, every
Hmm.
now and again,
Yeah.
because it gave me a win.
Hmm.
Every week I can do my radio show and
Yeah.
enjoy my work, no feel like I am competent in my work,
Mm.
and have a guaranteed walk away from the mic, push it away and be like, I did that
I did my thing. Yeah. I mean,
one day a week. One
uh,
and because my show is on Saturdays, I could have my whole week to work,
hmm
5, 6 hours on a Saturday, do a little bit of prep. I know exactly what I'm doing.
yeah.
Do it, have a little fun, listen to some music, be silly, whatever, but still feel like I accomplished something. When I tell
Yeah.
you that got me through the first 3 years of working for myself, I am not lying to you. And I still do it so that I have something fun to do at the end of the week.
Wow. I love that. I mean, that's a good little nugget right there. I mean, yeah, I mean, you saw what I have been feeling for the last 3 years is like, you get to a certain level. I worked in advertising, creative director, all this stuff, and I knew what I was doing. Like whether I was the best at it or not didn't matter. Like I knew I was good at it, and I knew how to get better at it. And I like the path was like completely obvious to me. And then you get thrust into the world of being an entrepreneur and doing your own thing. And it's like not only is the path not obvious to you, but it's like you you what I've found is like I'll chase like 20 different paths, kind of trying stuff on. And in the moment you don't always realize that you're trying stuff on. You think, oh, I guess maybe that's the path. And then it takes you a little while to figure out, oh, I guess that's not my path. And the whole while, it probably took about 6 months before my psyche sort of started to catch up and go like, dude, like you're not feeling great. Like, I had so much energy around it, I think at first that you just like zoom into it. And so I don't know if I've done exactly what you're doing, but there are certain things. I mean, honestly, for me, this podcast is this in a way too. I mean, it's not like it's out here making big money for me, but it's more like I started doing this, I started loving this. And it's like I do it every week and I know enough of what I'm doing to feel comfortable with it. And it does feel like a win for me. So I totally get that. And I think that's such an important thing. And I think I can imagine for kids popping out of school, it's like something, give yourself a thing that could
And
be so
think about
powerful.
And think about everybody who is going through some sort of transition right now, back to work.
Yeah.
Like we haven't talked as much specifically about that, but I think this whole conversation, if we
Yeah.
just changed the person that we're talking about,
Hmm.
that could be a thing. Like, the person who really was thriving at home because maybe
Yeah.
they're an introvert, or maybe
Hmm.
they're a caregiver. Maybe
Yeah.
they're a sandwich generation who is taking care of a parent with some,
Still
chronic illness, and have kids and a
hmm.
spouse,
Yeah.
and they're trying to figure out how to live all of that, and working from home worked for them, and going
Yeah.
to the office once a week worked for them. And now
Yeah.
they're like, how the hell am I
Mm.
going to get this done now? And nobody cares. Now I got to go to work every
Hmm.
day for eight
Yeah.
hours a day, and I'm not as productive as I was in the time that I spent at home. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
I do.
Um,
Yeah.
the person who's decided, like maybe they were part of the great resignation. They were like, you
Hmm.
know what? I'm 25 years into this. I'm enough. I'm
Hmm.
good. I'm going to go do something different. I've
Yeah.
learned something from this. I always wanted to try that. I'm going to go try it and see what happens.
Mm.
And then if it doesn't go exactly the way you want, then you got to figure out, okay, do I go back
Right. Yeah.
or do I double down?
Yeah.
My answer is always double down, by the way. Always double down.
I like
Always.
that. Well, I
Always.
think what I like is like your approach through your book and all that we've been talking about and the work you do. It it enables transition to be a little less scary, a little more
I
grounded,
hope.
rooted, as we talked about. And what really pops up for me is, you talked about the pace of change and all that. Like at some point, we're just all in transition, and I think that's what we need to recognize. And it's more maybe becoming more obvious now because the pace of things. And so to recognize like I am actively participating in who I'm becoming, and there's a way to do that that might work better for me than kind of like the hope and a prayer and spend my days doom scrolling to distract myself from the pain around me, like which is
Right.
what a
White
lot of us.
knuckling your way through the
Yeah, like I
whole
mean, and I
thing.
get it. Again, we've all done it, but
Exactly.
you could be a much more active participant in it, and I think that that's a really useful, empowering, and I think for me, calming.
I hope so. I
You
hope
know?
so.
Yeah,
That is my sincerest hope. Because you know what? Life is hard enough, TJ.
yeah, it is.
And work shouldn't be like work is the majority of that for us, as
Yeah,
especially as Americans. Like other
mhm.
cultures, not as much, but we all got to work, to live,
Yeah,
right? But, the question then becomes, are you working to live or are you living to work?
Yeah.
Which one is it? And what will bring you more joy? And again, no judgment, no
Right.
shade on
No wrong
whatever your
answer.
choice is. There is no wrong answer. And I
Yeah.
think we always look for like, is this the right answer? And then we're looking, is this the right
Right.
answer? No, 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 no,
Mm-hmm.
no. Look in, because you're the only one who can tell you because nobody is walking your walk. Nobody is doing stuff. I have had friends tell me, like, because my parents were older
Mm-hmm.
than most of my contemporaries' friends.
Yeah.
My parents, like, I lost my mom at 27.
Mm-hmm.
She was 60 something at that point. Like my
Mm-hmm.
parents were in their late 30s when they got
Yeah.
me.
Got it.
And so, but my mom still died pretty young, but I was
Yeah.
the first of my friends didn't know what to say to me. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And they told me as much. And I'm like, that's fine. I don't know what to say to me either. Shoot,
Yeah.
this is new
Mm.
to all of us.
Yeah.
But when my dad got sick, there were choices I had to make because he had dementia and
Mm-hmm.
and in particular the kind of dementia he had the same kind of dementia that Bruce Willis has. So
Oh.
it's a very different sort of
Yeah.
progression
Mm-hmm.
than, they stay functional on their own a little bit longer, but you have to have some more guardrails in place.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of decisions I made that one of my friends came back to me later and she said, you know what, I judged you when you did this. Like
Mm.
at one point, I'll tell you, um, I took his checkbook and I basically put him on an allowance. He had his debit card, but
Yeah.
because I had access to his account, I would take his money out of it because one of the things about his particular thing was impulse control because his
Mm.
frontal temporal lobe.
Got it.
So he could go someplace and not remember that he spent all this money or whatever. And I was
Mm.
like, just so your money lasts, like I'm happy, like supplemented things, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like, mm-mm, if you run
Mm-hmm.
out of money,
Yeah.
and all he had was a debit card, no credit
Mm-hmm.
cards, no other stuff.
Yeah.
And later, one of my friends came back and said to me, I thought you were wrong for doing that.
Mm.
And now that my mother is in this
Mm.
situation and she's gambling,
Oof.
because
Yeah.
gambling is a way, the buses come right to the assisted living and they take
Mm-hmm.
them to the
Oh yeah.
casino.
Oh
And
yeah.
you know what, for a lot of people, it's
It's
just
okay.
entertainment.
Yeah.
But sometimes it edges between, oh, I'm short this month because I went to the casino or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, I understand why you did it now. And she was like, I'm sorry for judging you. And
Yeah.
so you have to, in those situations, I didn't know my friend judged me for that. But
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I might have judged me for that
Yeah.
given another set of circumstances. But I
Mm-hmm.
had to stand on what I knew was right for me and my father and for us to be able to be whole and
Yeah.
get through this thing.
Mm.
And so, when you can make those decisions, and as the kids say, stand on business,
Yeah.
you can stand
You're
on
all
it because,
right.
you know what? I know I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so much of it, and I think that's so much of the noise in social media, people judging each other for different things, and whether it's the work from home or back to work, like all that. Like to me, what it ultimately comes down to is, what's best for each person, and how do we do our best to create a world that allows for that movement, that flexibility, that wiggle room, so that you can make those kinds of choices. I mean, even the notion of like you said, like, are we living to work or working to live? And I've often asked people like, what role does work play in your life? And it's like there is no wrong answer, and it doesn't have to be the same answer over time. Like circumstances change, whether it was with your father or whatever,
I
and you
guarantee you, work was not work.
not,
I was working so I could live
yeah,
and see my father
yeah,
through what he was
mm-hmm,
going through. I was
yeah,
not.
yeah,
And I was building my business when that happened.
mm, well, yeah,
So, but I was grateful when it started. This is the one good thing that boss did is because he was caring for a parent with Alzheimer's, he understood what I was going through.
nice,
And he was gracious about that. That's the one thing I'm thankful to that man for,
well,
because all the rest,
not so much.
basura, à la poubelle. Um,
Fair enough. Yeah,
but
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 that's
that is one
interesting.
thing I and is the one reason that if I ran into him on the street, I would still be grateful to him to this day because it made a
Yeah,
massive difference in my life.
yeah,
And I'm gonna tell you what I feel like all of this does. If we make the choice to stand on our own 2 feet, if we make the choice to be authentic, and the reason why I call it fearless authenticity is because it's not because you do it without fear, it's because you're afraid and you do it anyway.
Hmm.
When we see other people do it, it gives us permission to do the same.
Yeah.
And it
Mm.
lets us know it's possible,
Yeah.
that we can say, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is the lane that I own, and I'm gonna let you be in your lane because I can't do that.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, just the idea that, you mentioned the story about the boss. And I think that's a really interesting story just because even when we may be struggling to connect with another person in every way, there still could be that one way, and that still can make an impact, So like, and I don't know what that person's story is going on in their brain or their soul or whatever, but
I still don't.
like ultimately somehow they found their way to connect with you on that in a way that maybe served both of you ultimately.
Oh,
So I mean, I think that's like what I would say a hopeful sign when you're in the struggle, to realize like we can get there even when every other signal's telling us you're never going to get there, you
yep.
know. Yeah. So I know I've asked you a lot of questions. I'd love to give you a chance to ask a question to our audience. Do you have something you'd like to pose to them?
Oh, I would love to know in what ways they feel that work sucking has compromised them in their own path.
Mm,
Like, has it, because I have a theory, but I don't know if I'm right. But
yeah.
I feel like if you have, if work sucks for you, that it's also sucks the life out of you.
Yeah. I do too.
And but I wonder in what way that happens.
Yeah.
Like, and
How's it
and
show
is
up?
there a place like you were talking about with interventions for kid, like doing this work with kids
Yeah.
in their youth? Is there an inflection point where this kind of work might actually help?
Mm, yeah. I'm really curious what people say because I think for me, whenever work sucked, I know it showed up in the rest of my life. And I mean, it sucks at different times all the time, but like there's different kinds of suck. There's suck that you kind of like get dunked in and then you come out of, and then there's suck that you're just immersed in for some period of time. And I think
Yeah,
that's
I'm
the
not talking
suck.
about the temporary suck. I'm
Yeah,
talking
there's like
about
you're just like you're soaking in it, and you're living in it and you're steeping in it, and it's just like who you're becoming because of that like I'd have to kind of go back and look at that. So yeah, I will definitely put that to the audience. Um, we've talked a lot about how we could rethink about how we look at the world of work. If you could wave a magic wand and just kind of fully desuckify it right now, what would that world look like?
the world would look like people doing what they feel is their gift of doing in
Hmm.
service of others and being paid what they're worth.
Mm, that sounds pretty good to me. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, I would also add, since we also talked about coming back to work and working in the way that serves them,
Yeah. Mm.
right?
Yeah. I really like your perspective on the word serve, right? I know it shows up in kind of your framework, and serving can sound like this, like voiding myself to give to others. And the way you're describing it, it's like this more like mutually fueling way of giving and receiving, and that
Yes.
that feels like a lot
Thank
easier
you
to
for
step
getting
into.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you for getting that because a lot of people, I think, misuse that word.
Yeah.
But I also think it's the way that we're supposed to be as humans. Like that's the
Mm.
way our cultures were
Yeah.
back in
Hmm.
the day,
Yeah.
and having grown up in a small town and seeing some semblance of that,
Yeah.
in my youth, I feel like we're missing that.
Yeah.
We're missing
Mm. I agree with that. Well, one thing I don't want to miss is hearing you make a sound effect. So if
it.
you've listened to my show at all, you'll hear sounds. I have a lot of cat sounds. I invite people to make whatever noise they want. So I'm inviting you here, Jeanne, to contribute to our growing library of sounds. You got something for us?
I do. I absolutely do. And this is one of my favorite questions I've ever gotten. Just want you to know, because
Awesome.
when I tell you I've been walking around the house since you told me about that question, trying to figure out how I was going to do it. But um, I tried to envision it as what desuckifying actually sounds like. And it sounds something like, brr, brr, brr,
I
because
love that.
it starts off like
It's like it's trying.
messy and whatever, but then that same noise
Yeah.
in a higher register can feel so much better.
Yeah. It kind of like, it echoed like kind of like trying to start a car, like where it's like catching and then it catches and like there's like the joy in the moment of it, like boom, catching. And like I sort of heard that in your sound there. And just with the higher pitch, it's like, yeah, you've released something and also created something. Yeah.
From the same thing you started with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing I think all of us forget, is that,
Hmm.
sometimes you get into a gig, right? Especially if you've, had worked for the same company for a while
Yep.
and moved your way up and did those things. And you forget how much you loved it when you started.
Yeah.
You forget
Hmm.
how excited you were about it when it started.
Yeah.
And the doing the same thing can bring you that joy, but you got to figure out what's extracted the joy for you.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, Jeanne, I want to just give you a moment to offer up any links or sites that people can find your work, because you're obviously doing amazing work. How they can find your book, all that good stuff. I'll also put it in the show notes, but if people are listening, I want to make sure that they can hear it as well.
Fearlessauthenticity.com is where you can find me. And all the information about the book is at fearlessauthenticity.com/book. You'll also find all of my social handles. Please, I love to talk to people on LinkedIn, Instagram, even the Tiki Talkies. I hang out on the Tiki Talkies with the kids.
Very nice.
And
Yeah.
and occasionally I'll hop on Facebook and then, and then run.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's
Because
so
it can get
funny.
messy over there. But then I see, all my friends' kids graduating and
Yeah.
doing stuff and having babies. And then I'm like, oh, okay,
All
it's
right.
fun
It's
over
okay.
here.
The world's
This is
okay for a
nice.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you can find me all those different places.
Awesome.
And yeah, I would just love to connect with like-minded folks who are trying to make work a good place and not as sucky as it can be.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. All right, Jeanne. Well, thank you so much for coming on and, we'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me, TJ. It has been a pleasure getting to know you and talk about this.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Desuckify Work podcast. And a huge thanks to Jeanne for bringing wit, wonder, and wisdom to the show. You can follow Jeanne on LinkedIn and check out her site at jeannesparrow.com, where you can learn more about her book, her speaking and consulting work, and just spend some time getting to know a wonderful person. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to dive deep into some of your own challenges at work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session where we can explore new, desuckified possibilities for your future. Bye, everyone.